Ed Brialt is Vice President of Marketing and Industry Solutions at Aprimo. Ed is an accomplished marketing and software executive with more than 15 years of business transformation and marketing experience. Ed currently leads a team of marketing strategists and thought leaders who partner with top enterprise brands to navigate complexity, disruption, transformation, and change to the modern marketing organization. Ed holds a BA degree in Business and Management Information Systems from Bowling Green State University. Ed, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Kendra.
Chris Kaler is the CEO of mSphere. Chris founded mCare in 2003 and became the CEO of mSphere in 2014 after mCare merged with MarketSphere Consulting. Under his leadership, mSphere provides world-class advisory, implementation, training, and support services to help marketers utilize technology to its fullest potential and achieve results. Chris and his team ensure that marketers have the smart strategies, the right technology tools, process, and change management expertise needed to conquer chaos. Welcome, Chris.
Kendra, thank you very much.
And finally, Mike Carell is Vice President of Solutions Plus Consulting. Mike has more than 20 years of experience in business intelligence, product management, and consulting. As a managing partner at Solutions Plus, he has assisted Fortune 5 companies across the U.S. with assessing their data needs and improving their processes with reporting and analytics. Mike and his team help marketers get the most value from their applications by developing reports and dashboards to support, measure, and optimize critical business processes. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Kendra. I'm very happy to be here.
All right. Okay, gentlemen, we want to get started. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I think specifically, Ed, you've got the lead.
Thank you, Kendra, and thank you for joining me today, Chris and Mike, two change agents out there battling the modern marketing challenges of organizations. And this is actually, today's session is one piece in a three-part series that we're putting together and on various topics. And what we realized is that there is a lot of disruption that's happening to organizations, marketing organizations, at a steady rate. And going through all that disruption, the marketing organization needs to remain accountable and aspire to be and prove to be a value center, not just a profit center. And so marketing really needs an anchor point for accountability, is a word we'll use a lot in a hub. And there's some practices out there, marketing resource management or marketing operations, and they need that to really realize the business objectives and manage a finite amount of resources in marketing and decision support and the overall economics of marketing. And more than ever now, in today and going into the future, marketers will turn to marketing resource management as their true north and implement systems of accountability amongst this noise to really run marketing like a fully accountable business. And why? The reason is we want to free marketing up to do what marketers love to do, to be creative, to be strategic, and really to connect with customers, create great customer experiences, and engage at every touch point. And there's lots of them today. And it's really this need to blend the art and science of marketing in this modern age of data-driven marketing, really elevating marketing in this always-on, on-demand world that we're living in. And so the three parts here: run and measure the operation, and that's what we'll talk about today. Next part is manage and direct the business. And then finally, a deep case study in value realization. So I want to talk a little bit about what marketing is experiencing, and I like to talk about it in terms of what's disrupting marketing. So this is the conversation prism, And it's actually a live project that was put together by Brian Solis, and it's 25 categories of 110 different digital and social channels. And for me, this really represents hyper competition out in the market over getting to your audience, an interactive engagement economy, a very fast-paced, responsive time to market need. It's right up there with return on investment, the channel proliferation that's happening. It's a turbulent market, and customer expectations are changing. They're requiring us to deliver more content more quickly with fewer resources. And the idea is, as marketers, we need to be thinking about, what's next, and develop our innovation labs, and really evolve our organizations to be more adaptable to this change. Not just to initially adjust to it, but re-architect, redesign, and be able to be adaptable, assuming that that change is going to be constant. The next slide is exposing and showing the modern operational gap. So the idea is, with that burgeoning number of comms channels that are out there and increase in channel complexity, it's really driving up this need for content that is contextual and relevant for the audience. And this disruptive marketing is driving this gap in how to manage marketing in that finite amount of resources. So this modern marketing operational gap is exposed. And as marketers, we need strategies to focus in on that, to tackle it, or it'll absolutely crush the organization and increase the chaos factor. The gap really needs a strategy, and that's hence that term, systems of accountability, in that place, helping the organization. And while the organization is busy being disrupted, or even purposefully disrupting the status quo, we still have to be accountable, yet grounded in business, and as to not, bring in some healthy risk, but not inject too much risk, so that it can't be managed effectively, and stay within some controls. There's still impediments that are exposed as well. So organizational, strategic, and data. From an organizational perspective, some things that get in the way, there's still lots of the silos out there, whether it's business unit or geographic or communications. Those silos are getting in the way. Culture, and where there's culture, there's a term I like to use, which is legacy, right? So legacy, which is existing culture that's resistant to change, and transformation is needed. Also, there's often a lack of skills and talent in the organization. Role clarity is an issue, and task ownership, who owns it. There's resistance, and oftentimes the political landscape gets in the way, or even fear of what the truth is kind of gets in the way. So that's impeding accountability. From a strategy perspective, sometimes there's no explicit business objectives really linked to key performance indicators, and what does good look like, what is success, is not there, and there aren't clearly defined measurable objectives in place. And so there's that lack of performance goals. What are we shooting for here? And then from a data perspective, years ago we said we just don't have enough data to work off of, and if we had more data, we'd get better insight, but that's not a problem today. The exact opposite is happening. Is there's actually too much data, and it's how do we sift through it, how do we collect it, is it available? It's coming from numerous systems, and sometimes that process also creates an issue with the data. There's fragmentation, and if those things don't work together well, if there's no strategy around it, you lose trust in the data, and there's inaccuracy. And so if we're going to stay accountable, I want to offer this framework here It's a marketing accountability framework. The idea is it's going to help enable your marketing performance storytelling from an operational and executional perspective. And think about it as a marketing performance management roadmap. And the idea is, as an organization, as a marketer, you want to evolve to this 4-tier measurement approach and really have a small set of decision-driving key performance indicators. And these 4 tiers are: run the operation. So you're looking for information to help support how to monitor and optimize the operation. So some of those metrics and KPIs around the dimensions of cost and time and quality and volume metrics of the operation. But those by themselves aren't valuable enough to show the connectivity to business objectives. So what you want to do is be able to measure the operation. So information reflecting operation-specific performance or performance versus plan, and then also manage the business. Management information used to monitor and respond quickly to a variety of short and medium-term decisions. And this is where you're getting much better and you're starting to blend and tie operational and executional metrics together in your business storytelling. And then finally, direct the business. So information for successful execution of business strategy. Now, so focusing on areas of critical performance, it's the game-changing initiatives, it's your critical few, so to speak, things like profitability-based return on investment, customer lifetime value, sales performance or sales influence from a marketing perspective, budget performance, your brand health. Ultimately, these what are those key indicators of success? And so transitioning now, we will focus in on run and measure the operational aspects of marketing. And to do that, as mentioned, Chris and Mike, great change agents out there. Their organizations are helping large companies with lots of complexity who have this problem move on, evolve, come up with a strategy, and then implement that strategy and see the real value in these strategies. So from there, Chris, I'd like to hand off the baton to you to talk about some of the why behind marketing transformation needs.
I appreciate that, Ed, and look forward to sharing the story with Mike Carell with Solutions Plus. And for those of you that don't know, Msphere and Solutions Plus has been working together on similar clients for the past 8 years. So I look forward to working with Mike on this conversation. So let's talk about kind of framing up the discussion. Mike and I will be speaking from it. It's kind of helpful to talk about the marketing operations analytics framework. And as you can see, it consists of multiple elements: solution and process change management, workflow, analytic tools, and the continuous feedback loop of measuring, analyzing, and optimizing. And to frame up my role and Mike's, today I'm going to be talking over the next several minutes about workflow and why workflow is a key element in this analytics framework. But before I start, I'd like to take a quick 20 to 30 seconds. Hopefully everyone sees this poll. And I'd like for you to right now respond to the poll about what was the #1 reason for implementing your automated workflow solution. Some of you may have not implemented one yet. Some of you may have other workflow solutions. And I encourage you that even both of these are valid reasons, and try to focus on what was the #1 driving factor of why you initially went to implement a workflow solution. And the survey said almost 56%. The primary focus was on process management, information management 10%, and a third of you have not implemented an automated workflow solution yet. So that is consistent with what we have found over the past 13 years where we've been implementing and supporting Aprimo workflows for almost 40 clients. And for those 40 clients, quite often our point of entry into our client base is after that organization has already implemented workflow. So we have come in and we do implementations, and we are the first one to implement it, but the majority of the time over the years we've come in behind. And what we've found is that the number one reason for implementing the workflows was to streamline and automate the process. There was a big focus on, the primary focus was on process management. And that's not saying it's wrong, but it's one of the key elements, is the point. They were focused on the mechanical aspects of automating the assignment of work for their team, assigning the right task to the right person at the right time, doing it faster, doing it in a consistent manner, and eliminating non-value-added activities out of their steps. And what that process focus tended to do was that on the initial project, these clients would try to stuff as many workflows into the initial project scope as possible, because that initial focus was on, automating the work. And hey, I'm going to make my job better because we're going to automate it. I'm going to know when I'm supposed to do what, when. And what that tended to do is, even though these organizations, maybe in their project charter, said, yes, a key objective or goal in this initiative is to get visibility and focus on reporting and analytics. That initial focus on the mechanical aspects, the process management, sometimes pushed the analytics objectives outside of the scope, or the analytics and reporting got pushed to the back seat. So what I want to talk about here is, what is the impact when that happens? When you're just thinking about process management independent of your reporting and analytics? Well, as you can see from this gentleman's workflow design, it looks a little crazy, and workflows become overpopulated with low-level tasks. Some of the key data needed to measure and produce actionable insights isn't captured or generating. And key steps are left out of the workflow. Irrelevant information is captured and shared. And the bottom line is visibility is distorted or clouded. So what I want to talk about here, the key point of this slide, is to think information management when you think workflow. I'm not saying that the process or the mechanical aspects of trying to automate and connect a series of steps to people to get the right task to the right person at the right time is not important. What I am emphasizing is that when you're designing your workflow, focus on both your process management and your information management needs. And this is essential to be thinking about information management, to be including those information requirements into your design. Because your workflow, I hate to make this analogy, but it will stick in your head. It's an automated robot that's running around continuously, capturing, generating and managing the information that feeds the reporting and analytics engine. So it's really important that you think about those information requirements, or you're going to have a little automated workflow robot collecting and presenting information that's not relevant. And going back to the framework where we talked about the elements of the analytics framework, which is your data repository, the focus is to your workflow is going to provide a single source of operational truth. So it's key that you get it right in terms of identifying what information are you run around and capturing from your team. So on this slide, let's see, last slide I was talking about robots. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about, I got a guy. Without getting sidetracked, I have a guy. I have 4 kids. I lived in the same house for 20 years. And I had a guy called Mr. Ron. And my wife would call Mr. Ron about every 3 months, every 4 months, and he'd back his truck up, and we would be loading a bunch of junk into his truck. And as we're throwing this onto his truck, I'm looking at this stuff that I've collected through having 4 children and living in the same house for 20 years. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, when did I get this? Why did I get this? I don't remember using it. So that's a little silly analogy, but it does drive home the point of this slide. If your workflow is a little robot running around collecting information, you're going to want to make sure that it's collecting the key measures, metrics that are actionable, that give you visibility to get that feedback loop to be constantly improving your marketing operations processes. And that this slide is saying this is going to grow over time. And you're going to want to make sure that you don't have to have a guy like Mr. Ron back up his truck and be getting rid of, information that you didn't use. You didn't know why you got it in the first place. And it's a really simple analogy, but that is the message. In terms of, before I hand it over to Mike, that most people think about process management, about the mechanical aspects of, I'm going to get workflow, I'm going to make sure everyone gets the right task at the right time, they're all going to be doing their work, life is great, but don't include those information management requirements into that design, and things get a little cluttered, and you start becoming a collector of information and data that you don't know when that got into your house, why you put it in your house, and are really distorting the visibility into why you have a marketing operations platform, which is to get visibility and measure how well things are going, and to get that feedback to make the tweaks to make it better. I'm going to ask one more poll question here. In the spirit of my guy, Mr. Ron, this kind of relates to that. Have you ever audited and analyzed the data you're currently capturing to compare what you're collecting and capturing versus what you're actually using in dashboards, in reports? And it's an important thing to think about, because per that one slide, this workflow engine is going to be collecting information over time. And sometimes after something's been implemented for 5 years, 3 years, you're not getting the visibility you want. This is a good thing to do. So let's move forward and look at the poll results. It's almost half and half. That's good to see that people are doing that because I wanted to emphasize that you have to continuously not just look at that feedback loop from your reporting and analytics to measure how well I'm executing things. Sometimes you have to take a walk down into the basement and see what clutter do I have here. This is getting in the way, and we need to make things better. This is my last slide, but I'm actually going to skip through it because Mike from Solutions Plus is going to talk in detail about what key measures you should be and types of measures you should be collecting and capturing. And we can come back to this later if we have time, but it'll also be in your deck. So I'm going to hand it over to my good friend and partner, Mike Carrell from Solutions Plus, who I've had the pleasure of working with jointly on many of our clients. Mike, I'll hand the baton to you.
But no, really, Chris, thank you very much for your partnership and collaboration on this as well. And I would like to thank everybody in the audience for being here too. We know your time is valuable, and so we really appreciate it. So again, I'm Mike Carrell, and as Kendra said earlier, I'm the Vice President and one of the Managing Partners of Solutions Plus Consulting. We've been working with Fortune 500 clients to measure and optimize marketing operations for about 20 years now. So this has been our sole focus for nearly 2 decades. So as Chris said earlier, analytics often gets pushed out of the initial scope of the initial rollout, and Chris did a great job at explaining why that's important, to focus on that early, to incorporate it into your project. And today I'm going to take a little bit of time to also discuss why, just in general, why it's important to measure things, just to sort of remind us of why that's important. I'll take you through some real practical examples that we've done with our clients, and we'll also discuss why a marketing operations and analytics framework is beneficial. Okay, so Chris reviewed this slide a little bit earlier. Let's take another look at it and see where we're headed and where my organization fits in. So what we have here, again, just to sort of reiterate, is we have a repository of data built on a foundation of best practice process and an engine that facilitates and enforces those best practices. It generates and collects data as it functions, as Chris alluded to earlier. This operational data that's collected and generated is supplemented with strategic plans, financial information, and also metrics about usage and fulfillment, distribution of assets. So as things progress, you also add in performance data that enables higher level strategic analysis about what's effective and what's not. So where my organization Solutions Plus comes in is at the top. So we utilize analytics tools to help our clients measure, analyze, and optimize efforts. So we're all about getting the data out in a clear and concise manner to help you optimize your efforts. So let's pause for just a second to answer a quick poll question, maybe have a little fun with it. So which one runs the fastest? A turkey? Usain Bolt? I think you probably all know Usain Bolt. He's the Jamaican Olympic sprinter. And then our very own Chris Kaler here. So which one runs the fastest?
How big's the turkey, Mike? I think that you left that out.
He's a full-grown adult turkey. So
okay,
maybe 15 pounds, I'm thinking. So
okay.
So I'll go ahead and continue to speak here as you answer the question. We'll come back to those results in just a moment. So you have this framework, and it's storing and generating a lot of valuable data. What do you do with it? Well, very simply put, you take measurements, you analyze those results, and then you optimize your efforts. One of the major benefits of having the framework in place. So I think this seems pretty obvious, but let's remind ourselves, again, of why measurement is important. For many of us, it's easy to just make assumptions and make decisions on those assumptions without looking at the data. We typically have some qualitative, potentially biased, and maybe incorrect information, likely incorrect information that allows us to do that. We feel like we have what we need to just make a judgment call and move on. We're all very busy. Okay, so let's check out the poll results here. All right, Turkey's got, Chris, you're even with the turkey. I can't believe it. 22.2% for both. And I think maybe the type of question gave it away there. So, but believe it or not, the correct answer here is it's a turkey. A turkey can run 25 miles per hour, and that's faster than the world's fastest man, Usain Bolt. So Usain Bolt runs about 23 miles per hour. So go ahead and Google it. Check my facts here if you like. So that's an amusing fact, really, but it's also very helpful in understanding why we measure things. So if you aren't measuring, you don't really know. Measuring how fast a turkey can run and comparing it to the world's fastest man is a little bit silly, but it shows you how easily we can arrive at false conclusions based on our impressions of something. We've all been collecting information about turkeys our entire lives, and that suggests, that they're not fast, right? That's our mental bias about turkeys. I'm pretty sure you all probably share that same bias. So my next point here is measurements are also relative. Usain Bolt is extremely fast when he's compared to your average human, but not so fast when he's compared to your average wild turkey. So in addition to getting factual data, we measure so we can establish and improve accountability. People are really the key element in the process. The tool merely facilitates the process. So humans will complete their tasks faster if turnaround time is being measured and reported. If someone's paying attention to the numbers, then it just feels like it's more important. And ultimately, we measure so that we can take action to improve things and to optimize. So measurement facts, not biased assumptions, really lead us to the best areas for optimization. Okay, so when it comes to workflow and process measurements specifically, what do we want to measure? To determine what we want to measure, we need to step back and consider our goals just for a second. As Ed expressed earlier, time to market is extremely important. It's being emphasized more than ever. It's right up there with ROI. We're expected to deliver more content, do it faster, and with fewer resources than ever. And so, to improve time to market, we need to eliminate bottlenecks, reduce operational waste, and we need to hold individuals and departments accountable. So you start by providing visibility and then asking key questions. So proper questions then lead you to the applicable measurements and then ultimately what specifically to optimize. So if we step back and look at this for just a second, I think all of us here on the call could probably arrive at these goals, these list of goals and these questions pretty quickly. 30 minutes or an hour, we'd formulate very similar slides here. So it's really not the key challenge of determining what we need to do and what the questions are to get there. The real challenge that most have is where to get the data. So if you're not generating and collecting it as you go in a repository, then you really can't answer all the applicable questions based on factual measurements. You end up relying on instinct and conjecture, which is inaccurate and just not ideally what you want to do. So that's where the marketing operations and analytics framework that we've been discussing here comes into play. Once you've established the framework, you'll be able to take factual measurements and answer your questions correctly. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is to take you through a few real practical examples that we've produced for our clients to illustrate some of what you can get out of the marketing operations and analytics framework. So at the top of the slide here, you can see some of the questions, this type of graphic answers. For the next few slides, I've got applicable questions at the top like that. So this particular client was struggling with getting their initiatives completed by the time they were promised. As these efforts kick off, commitments were made, and they weren't being met. So we look back at over 223 initiatives that involve the same process steps. These are projects of the same type that have been executed through the standardized, same template, best practice template that's stored in the workflow engine and in the framework. Appropriate turnaround times, or your SLAs, have been established for each step in the process. So there's an understanding of how long things should take. It's sort of a negotiated agreement, if you will, that's stored within the framework for each step. So this graph lists out each step with the SLA for each step and how long it actually took. 20% of this client's initiatives were in fact late, and that comes at a very high cost. So what they're doing now is they're currently taking steps to improve this ratio and now have the proper set of tools in place to manage to that objective. Okay, so this example is a very similar example, but the output is formatted with a completely different visual representation. It's in a calendar format. So like the prior example, you can see the key tasks or steps of the process there on the left with their SLAs, and then to the right you get the actual results by month. So for this client, we found that nearly 1/3 of the 1,600 tasks that we analyzed were over the SLA, and that the average days to completion for this particular process was 19.7 days. And 19.7 days was way too long for this particular process. So that data led us to the next question. Are we more late when volume of work increases? This data suggests not. If you look closely enough, you can see for the top section here that February has the highest number of tasks, and yet things were less late in February than in January and March. So again, having the factual information helps you sort of avoid making false conclusions. So with a framework in place, you can start, at the summary level like this, and then move further into the details as you, to arrive at appropriate conclusions. So one question leads to another, and you'll have the information to progress through your analysis to the point that you make, optimizations that are correct, in fact. Okay, so here's an example of a more detailed look at the data. This is a snapshot of a single project. As you can see on the bottom right here, the project is predicted to be 21 days late. So this report highlights exactly which tasks are late and the resulting cost of those late tasks. You can see there in the next to the last column there are 3 tasks highlighted in red, and that the total cost of the project for the lateness of those tasks is 27.4 days. So some of the other tasks were on time, and that's what got it down to 21 days late in total, but it's still way off target. So this view is a shift from looking at historical data only and moves into using real-time data to predict future outcomes. So it enables you to take corrective action as soon as things start to go off plan, so that you can get them back on plan, and so that your critical dates aren't missed. So the framework enables you to look at both historical data and also to sort of look forward into the future and predict outcomes. So I'd like to cover just one more workflow example here. This example speaks to efficiency and accountability. This particular client set an objective to have 80% of their reviews completed on time. So we all know that reviews are critical to progressing creative development efforts, really any development effort, and are really the key quality control measures. So if they aren't done in a timely fashion, it slows down the whole effort. So when we looked back at the prior year for this client, they found that not one of their departments met this objective, not even for one single month for the entire year. So the average on-time percentage per month was 50.62% for the entire company for the year. So not very good here when they set out to do this and we looked back at the data. So this view also gives you an indication of quality and efficiency. You can see here that 64% of the creative work was being sent back for revisions. Some of those, revisions were more significant than the others. Revisions are definitely part of the process and they're expected, otherwise we wouldn't do them. But the goal was to reduce waste by reducing the amount of rework necessary in their efforts. So this client uses these reports on a continual basis to monitor and manage the situation. In fact, they've incorporated individual results into employee reviews, and that's how important they've made it. And so, based on their efforts, they've brought their on-time percentage up 33% to well over the objective, and they've also reduced their significant revisions to under 10%, and that's just tremendous improvement. Okay, before we wrap things up, let's touch on some of the other items you'll get with a properly implemented marketing operations and analytics framework. So far, we've primarily discussed workflow and process-related metrics. We don't have time to go into all the other things that you can measure with the framework, but I do want to highlight some of it at high level. Otherwise, you might leave here with an incomplete picture. Workflow is kind of the workhorse of the framework. It's generating data, it's collecting data, and that's why we focused on it primarily. But it's also important to marry the operational execution data with financial, strategic, and fulfillment data. So that's all part of the framework, and once you've implemented it, you'll have a complete and combined view that gives you one place to go for a single source of the operational truth. So it enables you to see the cost of efforts, how efficient your efforts are, whether efforts are aligned strategically, and then ultimately how what you've produced is being utilized. Okay, so how do you get there? It truly is a journey. You don't do it all in a single effort. You start at a foundational level and then you build upward, just as if you were building a house. So today, again, we've discussed the bottom two sections on the journey that's illustrated here with the pyramid, and we've really discussed establishing a marketing operations and analytics framework and how that enables you to run and measure the your marketing operations. So what you do, you start at a foundational level with start by monitoring administrative functions and operations along with cost and strategic alignment. And then in your next phase, you move on to more strategic considerations to manage and direct the business. You'll collect the necessary data in the same foundation, this very same repository, to answer higher level questions such as, am I focused on the right initiatives? Which initiatives and channels have the highest returns? Am I spending my money and resources in the best way? So it truly is a journey. Start with the foundation, build the framework first. And with that, that concludes my portion of the presentation. So thank you very much for your time today again, and I'm going to hand it back over to Ed.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, that was, that was fantastic. What you showed is you brought a very scientific approach to the problem that is facing the marketing organization. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on it to deliver today. And if you don't have the data to help articulate your story, right, your resource capacity, the volume, as mentioned, the volume of materials that marketing is on the hook for these days has gone way up. And to be given that insight, to be able to have your finger on the pulse of your operational data, you could make some real impactful business decisions on how to throttle up or down your the capacity in your organization, and ultimately you're managing costs and meeting the objectives that you have of your marketing team, which is ultimately tied towards revenue and the larger objectives of the organization. What I really liked also is, your example showed resetting your SLA target. So maybe the organization started and they had unrealistic expectations, and now they said, okay, now here's the real, based on data, this is what we can do. And now it's setting those targets and making those communications and meeting those commitments, keeping the rest of your stakeholders and marketing happy. And Chris, you also, some of the things I like that you mentioned is that workflow, or this operational engine really creates a new set of data that feeds your analytics engine. So it's a key piece of operations data that maybe is missing from a lot of organizational decision support systems. And you also said no measurement strategy results in collecting the wrong data, which degrades your data collection. Very true. And measuring workflow data identifies bottlenecks. So it's great opportunity, again, insight, allowing you to drive waste out of the operation, freeing the organization up to do more, remaining compliant, and really getting more content in market. So fantastic. Let's take some questions. The first one I got here is, Chris, I'll go to you on this. You mentioned that MSphere has activated and implemented many workflow solutions. What has been the biggest challenge specific to activating the workflow solution and driving organizational or user adoption? Because I assume it's not good if you don't get the whole organization leveraging the application.
Yeah, so let me focus on a piece of that in terms of standing up, whether it's initially standing up and activating your solution, but specific to user adoption. Some of the challenges to that, to oversimplify, is there are times when you don't have high user adoption, they are using a workflow that just does not fit them. Now, I think it's key to kind of say, well, how does that happen? And what we've seen, some of the causes for rolling out a workflow solution that doesn't receive high user adoption, it's usually one of several things. One is the key stakeholders or subject matter experts were not involved enough during the requirements gathering and design process for whatever reason. And that can happen because of other initiatives going on. But bottom line is they just didn't have enough skin in the game, didn't participate enough. And
right.
You're creating something for those users. A second element is when you're developing a workflow, and it didn't receive high user adoption, and it's squeaking a little bit. Lots of times we go in and see that the level of tasks that are being modeled into the workflow is a little too low, because initially people get a little excited about, wow, look at this powerful engine, I can create anything. And so we like to do a right sizing exercise to make sure that it's not too high in terms of the task you're assigning, it's not too low. So really getting right sizing the type of information that you're collecting.
That's great. Yeah, so if it's lacking strategy, if it's lacking sponsorship, and if you don't have the right game plan going in and the right measurement strategy going in, definitely you're not going to have the user adoption you're looking for. And then, so that was fantastic. And then, Mike, the examples you gave us were fantastic. How long, from the time we do activate, how long does data need to be collected in order to have enough to start that analysis and optimization?
Yeah, Ed, that's a great question. Really, you can start analyzing and optimizing right away at a discrete level. As Chris mentioned, it's important to sort of factor in what you want to accomplish early on into the implementation, so that you've built your workflows that they're collecting the correct data, and that is extremely important. But even just right away, you can start to analyze the first initiatives that you send through. You can see if things are late or slow or fast. You can start to look back at your assumptions that you've made about how long things take and see if those need tweaked or if things truly are slow. So there's a lot that you can do right from the onset, to start analyzing and optimizing. But after you're up and running a while, then you're certainly going to have a wealth more of data, of additional data that's going to be summarized and that you can analyze at sort of a higher level. But definitely start right away where you can. I think right from the beginning, you're going to have real projects coming through, real initiatives, and you're going to be able to take a look at those and glean some degree of insight.
That's great. Yeah, and I guess over time it just enriches the data set, giving you, maybe year over year more trending capabilities. The last question here that came in from our audience today is, Mike, looking at your examples, the audience wants to know how complicated are those workflows in those reporting examples that you shared with us? Are they fairly linear, or do they have a lot of variability and sort of stray from the execution path? And if it is the latter, how do you handle some of the on-time measurement with high variability?
Yeah, well, what a great question. So I think that the workflows in those particular examples were pretty complex, right? That's one of the major benefits of the tool, that it is flexible, right? So you can build out these complex scenarios, and things are dynamic, and they do change. So that's really sort of the meat of the solution there, is to go in and you have to set some sort of assumptions around what things are going to happen to be able to make appropriate predictions. So there's a lot that's built in, a lot of logic that's built into those particular examples about predicting, if something's going to be on time in the future or not. And sometimes, of course, that's more accurate than others. But we've got a pretty sophisticated solution in place in the example that that I showed there. So. Gotcha.
All right, thanks, Mike. Yes, you got to have a model up around the variability with assumptions built. Very insightful. Excellent. That was our last question of the day, and I'll hand it back to Kendra.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ed. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Mike. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. If you would like to contact our speakers today, you can reach them at the email addresses displayed here on your screen. Be sure to download the presentation from the resources section of your console. And just a reminder, this is a three-part series on marketing, measurement, and accountability. So please look for future communications around this topic. Once again, thank you so much for hanging in there with us, and have a fantastic day.